Specialist. And this is Astrid Leiden, the Adult Basic Education Professional Development Specialist.
We have some, staff like Sherry Eichinger, our administrative support, is participating as well virtually. And Todd Wagner, our State ABE Director, will hopefully be joining us shortly. During the webinar, we'll have times where we want to get your ideas and questions. Throughout the webinar, you can always chat your ideas and questions into the webinar chat function. Also, we will have a couple Q&A periods, and you can always click on the little hand on the toolbar, and you can raise your hand, and then we can call on you, unmute you, to ask your question audibly during those Q&A periods. If you have any technical needs or need any technical assistance, please ask Carla Vian. And thank you to Carla Vian and to Literacy Action Network for your support today. We have 5 topics for today's web chat. First, we're going to talk about some announcements. Then we're going to talk about professional development. Then we're going to start the conversation on program quality standards. We have most of our time, though, today will be spent on accountability. This will be very similar to, this will be kind of an additional training than add on to what we've done to regionals, and a lot more in depth, similar to what we did at the Spark conference and other things. But we have some new updates for you with our accountability system today. And then at the end, we'll make sure to take any additional questions that you might have. Let's start off with some announcements. Julie.
This is just a reminder for everyone that the memorandums of understanding with the workforce center areas was due July 1st of 2017, and they delayed having the infrastructure cost agreements due until the beginning of January. So I'm just reminding people, if your workforce center contacts you or the area in regards to the infrastructure cost agreements, just be aware that that may be happening.
Thank you, Julie. Another announcement, for any program that wants to become a new standard adult high school diploma program, we will be releasing an application this month, and the application will be due in February. You should be notified in March, and there will be a training for new program staff May 10th and 11th of 2018 here at the Minnesota Department of Education. If you're thinking about applying, look for an email from Sherry that will be going out to our manager, coordinator, and lead teacher list. We also will be posting that application on mnabe.org. Also, this is a reminder, this should not be news to folks, but we have the GED testing subsidy. There is plenty of money in the GED testing subsidy because our testing numbers have been down overall statewide. So a tester can get $10 off the first test in each subject when they enter MNGED10 into the promo code when they schedule and pay for testing. And this applies for any tester that is selects Minnesota as the location that they will test, and schedules testing in any approved non-corrections testing center in Minnesota or in one of our approved border communities. Also, yesterday we had a very eventful day here at the Minnesota Department of Education. We had our Minnesota High School Equivalency Test Selection Adult Basic Education Stakeholder Working Group, which is a very long title for a group. But they had their first in-person meeting yesterday. You can see on the screen here we have 16 members selected for the stakeholder group. We have folks from a wide variety of communities and ABE programs around the state. So I think they really do a good job of representing the state geographically, student-wise, program-wise, and otherwise. During our first meeting yesterday, a couple things, key things that we accomplished. One, we were able to review a lot of the feedback that we got from ABE staff on ideas for test proposal criteria. I had done presentations at Summer Institute, the North Regional, and the South Regional, and got lots of ideas about test proposal criteria that we're able to reflect on and add and develop some proposed or additional recommended criteria. In addition to that, we were able to identify some stakeholders for additional input and additional research needs so that we can kind of carry this forward. Our next step is that during the big thing that will be happening is in mid-2018, we will be having, the Minnesota Department of Administration will be conducting a competitive application process to determine which test or tests, plural, could be our official high school equivalency test for the state. And nationwide, we've seen typically 3 vendors apply for this type of grant or type of application. It's usually been either GED testing service, HiSET with education testing service, or TASK with data recognition corp. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Astrid to talk about professional development.
Okay, we just have a couple of professional development reminders for you. One is about our statewide professional development survey that was launched in early November. We wanted to remind everybody that that survey is open. It is significantly shorter than previous surveys. Our statewide ABE professional development statewide committee worked really hard to shorten that survey to make it more accessible, easier for people to complete. That will be open through January 5th, so we encourage all ABE staff, instructors, administrators, and support staff to respond to that survey. That is the key data that we'll be using to develop the new round of supplemental service RFPs. We'll be sharing that with our supplemental service and professional development providers to inform the PD that will be coming up in the coming years. And you are also able to request consortium level reports from Atlas. So if you'd like to use that data from respondents from your consortium for your program planning, you can contact Marisa Giesler at Atlas for a consortium level request. I want to thank everybody for encouraging and supporting your staff participation in that survey. Also want to let people know that we still have a couple of slots left in the contextualized career-focused basic skills instruction cohort that will kick off in January. This is a cohort that prepares instructors to integrate their basic skills instruction with career-focused content. So very applicable for someone teaching in a basic skills or English language learner class, and for someone who wants to integrate more career-focused content. Also great for someone who's teaching a career-focused course and wants more support in thinking about how to integrate that career-focused content with our 3 sets of Minnesota ABE content standards. So that application is available on the Atlas website, and you need to get those in by December 15th. Also want to remind folks about a new PD initiative that is starting this year, the Technology Integration Initiative, that's being run through the Minnesota Literacy Council. Susan Wettenkamp-Brandt is heading that up. This has been developed in response to the many requests that we get from the field for more guidance about providing North Star digital literacy standards instruction, as well as integrating educational technology to build students' digital literacy skills. So this involves a kickoff workshop followed by monthly webinars over the course of about 6 months. Participants will learn more about the North Star standards. I know many people are using the North Star assessments, but I think there's still a lot to be done with the standards themselves that should be driving instruction. And focus is on particular technology related to Google Docs and Drive. So instructors will learn about the standards, the technology. They'll have a chance to develop lessons using the standards and those technologies, try them out, and then share with peers. It's a great opportunity for collaborative learning, and really hope that you'll encourage your teachers to participate. We're looking ideally for folks who have some basic technology skills, but really would benefit from some support, peer support, and expert support from Susan in learning to apply those in the classroom. So get your applications in. Those are due a week from Friday. And then finally, just a reminder that our next big event coming up at the end of January, the Language and Literacy Institute. This is a 2-day institute focused on language and literacy instruction. You'll see here a wide variety of topics. The opportunity to go through the CCRS ELA Foundations training will be offered on Thursday. And then there will be a variety of 90-minute and 3-hour concurrent sessions over the course of the 2 days, ranging from very low-level ESL all the way up to the diploma-level instruction. We consistently get excellent feedback on this event, so hope that many of you and your instructors will be able to attend. That registration will be opening up soon, and you'll find that on our PD calendar and announced in the ABE Connect newsletter.
Okay, let's turn it over to Jody Versa to talk about program quality standards.
Thank you. If you've been paying attention on web chats, you know that I've mentioned the program quality standards project that I'm working on. I will say that that's still very much in the beginning stages, but kind of wanted to give you an update on where that is and another invitation to participate in a specific way. So one of the things that I've realized is I was initially thinking of this, so this is something I've been tasked with, is to kind of lead this project to develop program quality standards. And originally I was thinking of it as something that I needed to start this brand new discussion about what does program quality look like in ABE. But as I've started to talk to some of you in the field informally about that, I've realized that you all who are out there in local programs doing this work are thinking all the time about what program quality looks like in your setting. And really what I need to be starting with is to kind of get more informed about all of those conversations, and from there start to think about what are the similar threads, or what does a statewide description of program quality look like. So as I've been kind of gathering some information, I think that where this project needs to go next is some conversation, but also potentially some resource sharing around some of the tools and things that people in the field have already developed to kind of evaluate and assess program quality in your programs. So I've decided for now to start a Schoology group to kind of start some of those conversations as well as gather some of those resources. I know I have talked also about having webinars, and I think that's still a possibility, but I haven't scheduled any of those yet, and I'm thinking about the Schoology discussion group as a starting point. So I invite anyone who is interested to be a part of this conversation to join that Schoology group. I chose Schoology in part because if there are several of our PD initiatives going on where you might have already created a Schoology account, and so it'd be pretty easy to add this group. If you don't have a Schoology account, it is free and it's pretty straightforward to create an account. So once there's information here on this slide about once you have a Schoology account, how to join this group. You'll just need that access code. Also, definitely feel free to reach out to me directly via email if you want more support around getting into this group. And then my vision for the Schoology group for now is to start with a couple of questions. The first one is, what resources are you currently using, or how are you currently thinking about or describing or evaluating the quality of your ABE program? And just from informal conversations, and actually partly from the last web chat, I do have a couple of documents that are already there in the group that can be shared. One of them is from the SPCLC, which is the St. Paul ABE Consortium. That's a rubric that they use to evaluate quality across their programs and partner members. And I have another document shared from the Department of Corrections. That's a really extensive description of what program quality looks like in DOC education programs, and then some evaluation guidelines. So those are the kind of things that I'm hoping to be able to kind of pull together, and then I see those as valuable things that other people in the field might like to access and consider. So that's one sort of area for conversation, is just what are you currently doing and what are you currently using, and take a look at what other programs are using if you'd like to. The second thing that I want to start some conversation on is how do you get student input? So I'm really interested in this project and making sure that it's not just staff making the decision about what program quality looks like, but that we really engage the people that our system serves to understand what quality looks like and feels like from their perspective. So I'd like to start that conversation about how do you get input from students? What do you learn from students? What do you ask them? You know, what formats do you use? So that's just another topic for conversation that I'm intending to put out in that Schoology group. So this is an open invitation to anybody who's listening, anybody on your staff who's interested in engaging some more in this conversation about program quality. So for now, initially, that Schoology group is where that conversation is going to start.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to dive into the accountability. So I like how you get the really feel-good topic, Jody, and I'm now talking about accountability, which does not feel as feel-good. So Todd, Jenny Schlickebier, and I presented some of this information, and we're adding on to the information we presented at Spark. And I believe Jenny is with us as well, so that is great. So she can help answer any questions that we have, and we might need to unmute her along the way. We did use this cover slide as the start of our presentation, which was both, we get a kick out of it and seemed very apropos. But let's start off thinking about tests. So first with tests, it's important to remind you that the U.S. Department of Education has approved TABE 11 and 12 for the NRS, for our federal accountability purposes. They have a computer and a paper version. However, you cannot currently buy them, and it's also really important to know is that we have not yet approved them. Minnesota is looking into them, and then we're going to decide whether or not to approve them, and that approval would likely be for July 1st, 2018. Part of the reasoning for that is while the feds have approved the test itself, we actually have to get approval then in addition to utilize the approved test as part of our assessment policy. And you can roll your eyes all just like I do when I make that statement, but that is kind of the process that we live in. On the other side, in terms of CASAs, where there is no word yet about the new CASAs and whether that has been approved by the NRS. In fact, we know that it hasn't yet been approved by the National Reporting System for federal purposes, and they're still waiting to get some input from the U.S. Department of Education about the test and the approval process, so stay tuned with CASAs. This is also the time of year where we evaluate and revise our state adult basic education assessment policy. It's posted at mnabe.org in ABE Law and Policy. What I encourage is if you have any strong opinions about the ABE assessment policy, please email them to me by December 15th, and then I can consider that feedback as we develop our changes to the proposed assessment policy. The changes that we submit are going to be submitted by the end of December, and those will then be for our assessment policy that will go into effect. The new version will go into effect July 1, 2018. So every year we get a new version of our assessment policy. On the flip side, now let's talk about data, our second topic in accountability. Todd is currently working on our state ABE report card with all of our consortia listed. On that report, using our 2016-2017 data. And within that data, we're going to be trying to include level completions, your diploma and GED attainment within your students, how many of your students entered post-secondary institutions, and how many of them obtained jobs according to the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. It's important to know that while we are producing this report card, we are not implementing and we don't have no bar for program improvement currently with the results of this report card. So this will be for informational purposes for you to utilize locally and for us to utilize as a comparison, but there will be no official or no program improvement process implemented this year based on last year's results. It's also important to remind folks about our ABE annual data checkpoints. We're looking at the quality of our data, and we have a couple of key checkpoints that we utilize. First off, you know that we've had the long-standing June 1st submission, where as part of your annual application, you submit some tables that we utilize, and that all gets submitted via CERT for your consortium. Next, we had you, and by the end of July, we had you email data reports to Sherry. And then in addition to that, we pulled and matched data behind the scenes through working with SID and SID support. In addition, we had our latest deadline of November 1st. And there was no program submission on your end, but we did pull some additional data. Each of those checkpoints has to do with some sort of state or federal regulation where we actually use that data to actually match with other pieces or to submit for our federal report. So it's very important that we have the accurate data for each of those submissions. Looking at last year's data, there are a couple lessons learned. First off, it's important to know that only 61% of our last year's students had a Social Security number. That number is pretty low, and in fact, there could be consequences from the feds if that ever dipped to about 50% or less. We might actually have to go to a telephone survey system instead of data match, which none of us would want to do because that would actually pull a lot of significant resources, probably at the local level, to do that data matching locally. So we really encourage folks to continue asking for Social Security numbers and trying to see if you can't ensure that you get as many Social Security numbers in the system as possible. In addition, one of the other key alarms from last year's data were the significant number of students with no level assigned. And typically that meant they had no official or allowable pretest in the database. Many of them had more than 12 hours. So our long-standing policy has been if a student has 12 or more hours and they're a regular ABE student, not a conditional work referral, they need to have a pretest, a valid pretest. So we really encourage programs to look at their students and make sure that that no level assigned has very low numbers, or ideally no one, and that there's no one with more than 12 hours in that area. Because overall our goal is to ensure that SID has accurate and timely data. That helps us with our federal and state reporting, but it also helps to ensure that we are collecting our efforts accurately and documenting our successes accurately. So we're working with ABE stakeholders to identify changes to make within SID and other tools to ensure the quality of data and to ensure and to help us. We really want to make sure that there's quality data for program operations, but we also have to acknowledge that we have compliance for state and federal requirements. So one of these lessons learned is the expectation that data needs to be entered within 1 month. So make sure that you're entering your data with at least monthly, thinking about new students, thinking about your pre and post tests, ensuring that you have those daily contact hours in, diplomas earned, and any other NRS required information. Another key change is our rolling lock. We are developing with SID a 3-month rolling lock on hours and test data entry. This starts March 1st, 2018. That means that any entry of hours or editing of hours and tests that are more than 3 months old will be blocked starting March 1st. You'll see an error message if you try to enter older data anytime that you try to edit or enter that data. And however, we want to know, or we want you to know, that if you find any inaccurate or unentered data, tests, or hours, contact SID support and they can help you with that. Just to give you an example, so starting March 1st, You can enter class time and tests for the previous 3 months, December, January, and February. As March progresses, hours and tests can continue to be entered for December, January, and February. Time and test data from before December 1st, that will be blocked from data entry at that point. And then on April 1st, users can enter class time and tests for January, February, and March. And as April progresses, you can continue to enter hours and tests for January, February, March, and April, but anything before January 1st will be blocked. So you can see that that will advance every month. We'll see that rolling lock advance. So you cannot go more than 3 months back. The reasoning for this is this complies with federal guidelines on what data quality assurances they need. A second change is there's going to be we're implementing a limit on entering hours for students with no EFL. Starting July 1st, 2018, you locally will not be entering student hours past the 12-hour mark for students who have no educational functioning level or no valid pretest. You'll see an error message in SID when that occurs. You also will not be able to enter student hours for conditional work referral students or for conditional work referrals once they hit that 30-hour limit.
Can we pause here, Brad? And there's a couple of questions coming up. So Elizabeth asked a good question about the hours being locked after 3 months. I think is Elizabeth's question. Let us know if not, Elizabeth. Will that include volunteer hours?
Our intent is only to include student hours and student tests, but I'd like to unmute Jenny Schlickebeer to really help confirm that issue. Jenny, I'm going to unmute you right now. And I know you're also self-muted, so Jenny, if you want to unmute yourself, ideally, so that you could kind of help convey it.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. To be honest, we only discussed the student hours, so I don't think I have a concrete answer on that. In the data system, it would be possible for us to treat those differently. So if we just wanted to focus on the student hours, we could do that. If we wanted to put them all kind of on the lockdown, we could do that as well. So I think I can discuss that further with state folks to see what would be preferred.
Okay, so I think so at this point, since this is an issue that we haven't yet discussed, Elizabeth, we'll get back to you on that. Like we said, we were intending, initially we really only confirmed student hours and student tests. So stay tuned.
And then there was another question that Jenny's answered in the chat, but just want to capture that here. Patty asking, so does the target move by day or by full month? And Jenny clarified that it moves forward full month rather than day by day.
Yeah. So the first of each month, you'll see you'll have a new month lockdown.
Yep.
Or a new old month lockdown, if you will. Okay. Any other key questions in the chat function?
Nope. It looks like that was it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, then kind of changing areas within our data. We also want to take some time to look at that at individuals with barriers to employment, because this has been kind of a key issue as well. So under the individuals with barriers to employment within our WeOS sessions, you've seen this chart before, but it says that one of those key populations that we're tracking separately with all of our performance measures are individuals with 2 years of exhausting lifetime eligibility under the SSA Title IV Part A, which we all know very well, correct? No. It was so bureaucratic, I constantly have to reread that as well myself. What that means is MFIP, or Minnesota Family Investment Program, TANF, what used to be called welfare. This is a self-report. So if someone is enrolled in MFIP, they would self-report when you do the intake with them. You ask at intake, when do your MFIP benefits end if you're enrolled? If the simple answer is, if they know, you enter that date in SID. If the student doesn't know, which many, if not most of our students don't know, then just leave it blank. we are not asking you to like start calling up a bunch of job counselors. We're not requiring you to start tracking this data down. It's a simple ask, self-report at entry. So if they know, enter the date. If they know the date that the MFIT benefits end. If they don't, it's fine to leave it blank. That is not a problem. Then one of our other tasks that we're launching in 2018 is the development of a data monitoring tool or set of tools and resources that will be available locally and at the state level. So we are working here at the Department of Education with SID support, with Jenny and her team, and with the SPARK committee, our professional staff across the state, to see what reports or tools or data metrics or things should we be looking for that would help us ensure that our data is accurate and timely and high quality. And so what we're asking for you to think about, and I'm encouraging you to chat in some ideas. What would you want to see in a data monitoring report or tool that you could utilize or that you think is important for programs to be able to track easily? So please chat in your ideas, and we'll continue to collect those, and we'll utilize those as we dive into this project into early 2018. So again, what this is it would be ideally probably a set of reports or maybe one comprehensive report within SID that would kind of be a data monitoring tool that could be used by a manager, a support staff, or a teacher, or whomever, depending on what the tool is, to see, do we have all the data in that we need? Does everything look good? How do we compare? So continue to chat in your ideas into the chat function, and we will collect those and report those out to SPARK next year in early 2018. Overall, what all of this is telling you is that this is time for you to review and ensure that your ABE program has some comprehensive and complete data procedures. We're working to develop that tool, as we noted, and we are reiterating that student test and hours data needs to not be more than a month behind, and that student attendance data needs to be daily attendance data. So you ideally be entering that as soon as possible, because if that gets backed up, that's really hard to catch up on. So the goal locally is all of your data is no more than 4 weeks old by the time it's entered into the database, and that all ABE students have a pretest, with a valid pretest, I should say, and an educational functioning level. Do we have any questions in the chat? Okay.
A couple folks chatting in their ideas for data monitoring. Thank you. Keep those coming in.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Well, then let's talk about our third area of accountability, and that is performance measures. And I love kicking off by just reminding you all that the feds have not yet negotiated with us any performance targets for the 2017-2018 year. So what does that mean, programs have been asking us? For this year, we are asking each consortia to achieve more hours and a higher percentage of level gains than last year. And ideally, try to meet last year's targets for level gains. That is our charge for local programs as we go forward this year. And it's important to know that what we used to call level gains has now been replaced by the term measurable skill gain. Level gains are still a key component of it under pre and post test. There still are our pre-post test gains that are part of measurable skill gain, or what we often are calling now, we're often calling measurable skill gain, MSG. But you'll notice that adult basic education now has 4 types of measurable skill gain that we can utilize locally. In addition to pre and post tests, we can use secondary diplomas or high school equivalency diplomas as a measurable skill gain. So yes, that means if you have a student who gets a high school diploma or a high school equivalency diploma, that will count as a measurable skill gain, and a lot of local programs are happy to hear that. In addition, we are working on the completion of Carnegie units, on defining that with the federal government. What this means is that for any local program, ABE program that has a credit completion or credit recovery program, your program can earn a measurable skill gain, or that student can have a measurable skill gain when they earn a certain number of Carnegie units, which are also known as high school credits. And so, so stay tuned to see how we define this. This one is still up in the air because we need some additional information from the federal government on what they're considering or what their benchmarks are in this area. Finally, our other type of measurable skill gain that is now part of our WIOA system is post-secondary entry after ABE program exit. This one gets a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, in that the way that the feds have defined this is that a student officially exits or stops attending adult basic education programs and then enrolls. It has to be after they've stopped receiving ABE services, then they enroll and start attending post-secondary education. Now, unfortunately with that, what that means is if you're working with a college and doing concurrent enrollment, integrated education and training, or other types of best practices, unfortunately that might not count for this type of measurable skill gain. This only counts for those that stop attending your program and start entering enter post-secondary and start attending post-secondary after they leave. Now, some programs have started to asking, oh, so does that mean we should stop doing IET or integrated education and training? Should we stop doing collaborative programming with the colleges to try to get more measurable skill gains? Our answer is no. Don't worry about this one as much. Do what is best for your program. Do what is best for the student overall. And for most students, it's best to serve them concurrently in some of your program cases. Continue to do that. Do not change your programming, how you're doing your programming because of this program entry or program exit plus entry into post-secondary education aspect of measurable skill gain.
And likely many of those students will still be able to achieve measurable skill gain through the achievement of a secondary diploma or equivalent or through a pre and post test.
Absolutely. And like we also said before, we don't even have any targets on this right now, so so don't worry. Do what is best for the program. Do what is best for the students.
Brad, Anesia has a question on that slide. Her question is, so if a GED grad who is now doing AccuPlacer prep and enrolls in college at MCTC, should they be exited after the GED is earned?
They should be exited if they no longer are receiving ABE services, but if they're still participating in your program because they're doing AccuPlacer prep, continue to do that. Do not exit them. If they earn their GED while in your program, you automatically get that measurable skill gain under that secondary diploma / equivalent. You don't have to exit them for that.
Another question, will there be targets for all types of MSGs?
In theory, we don't know yet. We don't know what that's going to look like yet in the future, and that's why I think the feds have not yet negotiated performance targets with us, is because I think the U.S. Department of Education is trying to decide how they're going to do this. Overall, federally, not within the U.S. Department of Education, but within all of WIOA, all of the titles of WIOA, they're just looking at 1%. What percentage of participants have a measurable skill gain? So they're kind of compiling all of these into one simple metric for some of the reports. But we know that the U.S. Department of Education is going to want to see a breakdown of each of these. And you see that we see that already in the reports that we're giving to the feds. So we don't know what our official targets will be locally yet. Any other questions in the chat box right now?
That's it so far.
That's it.
Okay, great. So I want to dive in a little bit further on pre and post testing. So when a student gets a measurable skill gain based off of a post test, The great part is that we've worked with SID to make sure that every program that worked with that student during that period gets credit for that level gain, not just the AB program that post-tested them. And so that way it's just accurately reflecting that everyone contributed gets credit for that. So that should help you worry a little bit less and help you collaborate a little bit more with your other AB programs that are sharing students. And so for all of you that really love to hear the technical bureaucratic speak, this is the indicator for measurable skill gain. It's that percentage of participants during the program year are in an education or training program that leads to a recognized post-secondary credential or employment, and who are achieving measurable skill gains defined by academic, technical, occupational, or other forms of progress towards a credential or employment. This is a much more complicated way of saying exactly what we were just saying up here, so don't worry about that technical definition. But one thing I do want to kind of reiterate is we do have, as part of that now, measurable skill gain includes earning a secondary credential. So it's important to remember who is responsible for documenting who has the secondary credential. For credit completion diplomas, for standard adult high school diploma, and for high school equivalency or GED diplomas. Think for a minute about which ones you think you're responsible for documenting in SID. The short answer, or the real answer, is that for credit completion diplomas, if you have a credit completion or credit recovery program, you need to be entering when that diploma is earned in SID. We don't have a statewide record of that. In addition, we need you currently to also note when a student earns a standard adult high school diploma and check that in SID. We're working with SID to make that automated, but we still don't have that up and running. So for now, if you have a standard adult high school diploma program, make sure that you're marking when your students are earning that diploma. The one that we are tracking at the state level through data match is high school equivalency or GED diplomas. And we're working with Urban Planet and GED Testing Service on that. The great part is we are working on trying to get those GED diplomas matched into SID so that you can see those. Right now it's happened only once. We're trying to implement a quarterly system where once a quarter we're matching which students earn a GED and then matching that back into SID. Long term, we're hoping to make that more frequent, possibly weekly or daily. The problem is getting the systems to talk. We need some dedicated IT staff here at the Department of Education, and unfortunately, we just don't have the funds for that to help with that. But we're working with Urban Planet to try to make this happen.
Brad, we do have a question regarding credit recovery diplomas.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be a place in SID to record how many credits a student earns while doing their credit recovery?
That is, the specifics of that are unknown yet, but I think ultimately that probably will be what needs to be developed, but stay tuned on that. Like I said, we still need some additional information from the feds, exactly what are they looking for, and then that will help us know what should we build into SID. And ultimately, yes, we need to know what the feds need, but and we need to know how to pull that, but we also want to know from you locally as we start to develop this. When we get close to developing this, we'll be wanting to get information from you. What do you need to see, or what is helpful for you in that system? So stay tuned. Any other questions from the chat box? Okay. So these are our measurable skill gains yet again. So that's just concluding that part of the discussion. Now let's talk about some of the other indicators that we have as a system. We have some employment indicators yet, so we're checking for all students. This is not just students who are unemployed or employed. These are all students, even if they're not in the labor force. We're checking them for employment, the second quarter after exit and the fourth quarter after exit. We also are checking we're also checking students' median earnings the second quarter after exit. All three of these are done by a match of Social Security number with DEED databases, or the databases at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And that is something that Todd helps oversee and coordinates across our state agencies. In addition, we do have a credential attainment indicator, but it's important to know that this one is a little bit more defined than what we see in that measurable skill gain. What this credential attainment indicator, which is separate from the measurable skill gain earning a diploma, is that someone has attained a secondary school diploma or its equivalent, and also is moving on to moved on to employment or post-secondary education. And so this one is really credential plus employment or post-secondary. That's what this indicator really is measuring at this point. And that data, that tracking of that happens 1 year after the student exits from the program. So 1 year after the student exits, any student that earned that diploma will be checking to see, did they enter employment and or post-secondary? Stay tuned on this one as well. The other thing to note is that programs have started wondering, I don't see an exit button necessarily within SID. Well, how do we define student exit? The feds have defined student exit as when a student has no participation with ABE services for 90 or more days. And so we automatically are doing that. SID, our wonderful SID support and SID programmers have already developed this, so it's happening behind the scenes. That the federal definition of student exit is happening for our reporting purposes that we send off to the feds. But make sure what you need to do is you need to make sure that your class rosters are up to date and that you're entering that daily attendance accurately and in a timely basis to ensure that we can track all of this. The other key thing to know is that let's take a moment to talk about students in corrections. I'm talking about state corrections and county corrections, whether you're in a prison or a jail. Any student that you're serving in a prison or jail is exempt from the employment and the median earnings and the post-secondary tracking. All the correction students are being tracked on are measurable skill gain. Okay. That is everything that we had in the accountability area. What questions are we seeing at this point?
So Becky is bringing up a good question, just kind of putting out there, trying to gather information from other folks about how, if anyone has good ideas about students who are reluctant to share their Social Security number, and sort of what ideas to explain to them why it's important for them to do so.
Yeah, great question. I think that's a very valid question. So typically overall, what we're seeing a lot of programs say, and I encourage any participants to chat in their ideas, but I think there's two things that we should be mindful of in this process in particular. One, it's important to kind of clearly articulate why we're asking for this information. Why we're asking for Social Security numbers is that so many of our data matches depend on Social Security number. DEED cannot match to other indicators like name and date of birth. The Department of Employment and Economic Development needs Social Security numbers for their purposes. And so if we have a large number of students, if the majority of our students are not supplying Social Security numbers, what that means is the future of adult basic education could be in jeopardy. This happened to other programs like Head Start, where they lost all their federal funding because their program wasn't able to document or demonstrate how their students were succeeding. So if we can't document how our students are succeeding, or that a sufficient number of our students are succeeding, then that could potentially put the entire program in jeopardy in the long term. So that's, I think, somehow I would find a way to clearly articulate that to students. The second thing is kind of more behind the scenes for you as a program to think about. We spent some time at the Spark conference where programs are saying, well, you know, the way that we're doing our current data entry is that because we have remote sites, the teacher at the remote site that's teaching by herself, she'll do the intakes, and then she kind of holds on to those, keeps those intake forms in her car or something, and then they get sent at the end of the month or at some point to the central data person for the consortium. And we've stopped collecting Social Security numbers because we're worried that that data will get stolen. This is why you need to have, rethink or review your data procedures. I agree. You do not want Social Security numbers and private student data floating around in someone's car like that. But you need to find a way locally to document those Social Security numbers for your students in a clean, secure, and timely way. And so a lot of programs that, like the programs that we're previously doing, where they would have the teacher kind of take the intake forms in her car and then eventually bring them over to the central data office or a similar type situation. What they're talking about doing, those programs are talking about doing, is giving those local teachers access to administrative access so that they can enter the Social Security number directly into SID themselves, and then they don't ever have to actually write it down on paper. They don't have to keep it on paper. And so then they'll black it out with a magic marker or white it out with a whiteout to make sure that that's not visible after it's entered into SID. And that's entirely appropriate and allowable.
And I think if you're doing that review of your procedures to make sure that you're keeping data secure, that's something else you can share with your students, is some of the steps that you're taking to make sure that the data that they give you is kept in a secure manner.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, yeah, we need a lot of this information for our programmatic purposes, but we also have a responsibility to treat this data privately and securely and make sure that we're not putting any of our students in jeopardy.
And a clarification question has come in. I found that I can get the last 4 digits pretty easily when they resist the whole number. Does that help at the state level?
No.
And Mary and Jenny replied, no, it doesn't.
No, unfortunately, DEED requires the entire Social Security number because we use the last 4 digits frequently with our GED records here at the state, and it's amazing when you put in the last 4 digits how many people's names come up. So the last 4, unfortunately, are not sufficient.
And the other thing to keep in mind is if we don't get enough Social Security numbers, then we're going to have to move to either doing surveys for follow-up or follow-up phone calls, which will put additional burden onto the ABE programs to do that type of follow-up, and we really do not have capacity, or at least we feel at the state level that the local programs do not have capacity to do that. That's just something else to keep in mind.
Another question coming in, would it be appropriate for staff to take a photo of their record and send it to our email?
So typically, according to state statute, email is not considered a secure form of data transfer. And we encourage programs not to utilize email as a way to transport or communicate private student data, including Social Security numbers. Faxes are, because those go over the phone lines, those are considered via state statute to be secure. There are some programs that have explored the idea of, well, what if we encrypt the email, or what if we encrypt the documents that the private data is in? And ultimately, I would encourage you to talk with your district and your local program to see what's appropriate in certain cases like that.
Another good just clarification coming over the chat, that again, we don't need to give students an exit status, and so we don't need to exit students on their history page. That's being done automatically, but it is best practice to be dropping students from classes if they're no longer attending.
I think
we got a couple more questions.
Couple more questions.
That came
okay.
Through. Yeah. Let's see. Penny wanted to know, is there an easy way on SID to find out what students we do not have Social Security numbers for?
This is a question that I'm going to have to turn over to Jenny Schlickebeer. Jenny, I think this would be a good time to unmute you again, maybe to answer some questions. But Jenny, it might be helpful if somehow you can turn off the mic, turn off
Yeah, there was some feedback going on your end on the other side. So
feedback, and I'm trying to remember what we could do.
Multiple microphones going on.
Yep. So Jenny, I'm going to unmute you. Just 1 second. Okay, Jenny, you're unmuted. Oh, you're muted again. Now you're unmuted again.
I don't have more than one microphone on, so I'm not sure what's causing the feedback.
It's good right now.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. And I just chimed in on that one about the student data export report, where you can find, there's a column now that shows if a student has a social security number on file. We also added to the the student program summary report, which is similar to the data export, but has all the info summarized. On that report, now on page 2, is a little table that shows you what percentage of your students have a social security number and what percentage do not have a social security number on file. So you can look there first to see if your percentages are low, and then you can go to the data export report and really zoom in on who has them and who doesn't if you want to start possibly going to current students and asking them for the info after the fact.
Okay.
And then I think Scott Helland is bringing up the issue of how do you broach this topic without kind of scaring off undocumented students.
So maybe if folks have thoughts on that, they can chat that in, how they've effectively negotiated that. Jenny, it looks like Laura's looking for some clarification, the data export report and which other?
Okay, I was just typing up an answer.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
We're trying to just so people realize we're trying to read some of the chats, because if someone is listening to the recording, they will not see the chat. So that's why we like to make sure we address all of them orally as well.
Okay, so on the report screen, you scroll down, there's a section called Demographics Report, and one is called Program Summary Report, and that one is the one that gives basically the summary. So it has several pages of information. It summarizes ethnicity, educational background of your whole student body. And we just added social security number onto that. So it'll tell you how many have social security number and how many don't. A summary percentage that you can look at to see where you stand. The other report is called the Program Summary Data Export. It's also on the reports page, listed right below the previous one. This report, when you run it, it lists every single student who had hours in state range and all kinds of their demographic information, including whether they have a social security number on file or not. So then if you decide this is an issue you need to target, you can go to this report, find the students who are missing social security numbers, and start tracking them down if that's what your plan is.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
Jenny, it's kind of amazing how much quicker this is going today than when we were in Spark.
I know, yeah. Well, you know, we answered a bunch of questions for folks that day, so hopefully we're ahead of the curve.
It's true. There were a lot of questions. It's definitely different doing this virtually versus in person. Okay. Please continue to chat in any additional questions, or you can raise your hand if you have questions by clicking on the hand icon on the toolbar. Okay. So also, just while you're doing that, we do want to promote our 2018 web chats, the ones for the first half of the year at least. Our next web chat is already next month. A lot of staff have come to us and said, "Oh gosh, 1 month and we're doing another web chat? It seems to be an error." And I have to agree. I thought the same thing. I forgot that we had done this. But yes, our next web chat is Wednesday, January 10th. And then our next one won't be until Wednesday, May 9th. So a big larger gap in between there. And so our time for those web chats will be 1 o'clock to 2:30. We also just want to thank you and encourage you to fill out the evaluations after the web chat. And also note that all the recording and handouts will be on the Literacy Action Network website. I want to really encourage everyone to download the PDF of our PowerPoint and make sure that you have a lot of that accountability information, because there's a lot of good information in there that I want to make sure that you take time to process after the webinar. And looking through a PDF is way less painful than listening to a webinar sometimes, so, waiting for that one specific answer. So really download that PDF and take a look at the slides again and kind of think about how you want to communicate this with your staff and your colleagues. And that will be available on the Literacy Action Network website. So at this point, we're going to open up to any type of questions that you might have. Anyone with any questions, feel free to click on the hand icon, raise your hand, and we can unmute you to call on you, or you can chat in your questions.
And Carla put in the chat box the link where you can find the web chat archive.
Oh, Sherry asked about the GED subsidy. When is that going to run out? At current calculations, we probably are not going to run out of the $125,000 for with $10 off per test. So I'm thinking it might last the entire fiscal year, Sherry. That's our current estimate, which is good because it's frustrating when we see an interruption.
Sam is asking if we can please review again the slide on participant exclusion. Looking at the corrections.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So we'll go back to participant exclusion. So this is really just noting with all of our performance measures, remember we're talking about our performance measures are measurable skill gain, employment after second quarter, employment after fourth quarter, median earnings, and credential attainment and entry of post-secondary and/or employment. For all ABE students are responsible or are going to be measured for measurable skill gain. Any student that is in corrections in a jail and/or prison, they will only be tracked for measurable skill gain. They will not be tracked for employment or median earnings or other types of markers or performance measures. They'll only be tracked for measurable skill gain. Is there another question?
Yeah, I'm just answering one here. In regards to other than, let's see. Oops, I missed it. Don't find it.
Outside of contacting the local workforce center, who can help regarding a copy of the MOU submitted during this past summer?
Yeah, and you're probably going to have to contact the Workforce Development Area Board Chair for your region in order to get the Memorandum of Understanding. I have asked that the state compile those and post them on their website, but that hasn't been done at this point. And I've gone on to look for all of them on all the local websites, and it is really a matter of going to the board chair and asking them for a copy of it.
Thanks, Julie.
Yep.
Okay. So, and one other reminder from Jenny in the chat regarding some of the SID items. For anyone taking a look at the program summary report, definitely make sure you click from page to page so you see all of the information in that report. Okay.
Pat is also suggesting that you might be able to get that MOU from your ABE rep on the local board.
Yeah, not all boards have theirs yet. That's the issue.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you all so much for participating today.
Oh, we have someone with their hand up.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, the hand is down.
Eric, looks like Eric learned. Eric, I'm going to unmute you. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have a question?
Okay. We're having some trouble hearing Eric. So we did also have just a note from Teresa Zingery saying that their MOU with their Workforce Center is still in development.
Mm-hmm. That's why the board chair is probably the best person to contact, because they'll know where they are and that either it's completed or it's being developed.
Excellent. Okay. Well, if you have additional questions, we will take them. We'll continue to take them afterwards, but otherwise, have a great holiday season. Have a great end of the year, and we will see you next year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.